The show 2021 is a culmination of the last year and a half of a series of Zoom calls hosted by artist Mike Sorgatz. The virtual gatherings didn't begin with the potential of future group show in mind. The informal meetups began as a way to combat the isolation and fear brought on by the pandemic. It then continued through the protests for social justice, a relentlessly ugly election, and attempted insurrection, and continues well through today. The show is an acknowledgement of that time together. It is born out of a book that we've created for the same purpose, which is also on view in the gallery. It is a testament to what artists can do for themselves when everything else is falling apart. The artwork spans a wide range of subjects, content, media, and approaches. The group casually discussed including works loosely related to themes of connection and community. Without preconception, we were pleasantly surprised to find once our work was gathered, that formal, conceptual, philosophical, ontological subject matter, and infinitely more connections abound between the artworks that were created separately and individually.
There you are, Janice.
Hi. Hey, I'm Mary.
Hi. There's your painting.
I'm gonna ask you to mute though, Mary.
I know.
We're almost through with the video walkthrough. It can be very challenging to get 18 artists in the same place at the same time. So not everyone is here tonight. They have provided brief statements that will be read in their place. And I've already said this, but if you think of a question as the artists are speaking, please type it in the chat and include the name of the artist if you can remember. Elizabeth is monitoring the chat and can help facilitate when we get to the end. And we're starting off with Spring.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. So while checking in with others over the last year, it was sometimes obvious how they were doing and other times not so much. As the trying times went on, people were more likely to open up with a new honesty that I felt was really refreshing, but also making it clear that each of us were experiencing something really draining. As a parent, I was constantly feeling at odds with myself, simultaneously filled with love just to the brim for my boys and this extra time we had together that we were suddenly given and wouldn't have had otherwise, while also absolutely tapped of every last ounce of energy or sweetness I had. You know, not only due to the personalities at home, but the true gauntlet of everything happening in the world. So while working through this daily push-pull and constant contradiction of feeling grateful yet incredibly flattened, there were a number of ways I could fill myself back up. Anything related to food, making, baking, consuming, sharing, a movie or Netflix binge, building the 3rd or 18th blanket fort, or joining in on these regular calls. These familiar faces, studio faces, are ones that I've grown to know over the years. like a motley crew of studio relatives, with a camaraderie of stories shared and jokes cracked and general understanding that the world is, or was, and is bonkers. For me, this adult understanding was a welcome deviation from my daily routine, which filled my cup back up.
Thanks, Frank. So I'm Katherine Forst, and this is my piece, Inside an Activity Book. So with this piece, I was thinking of the ways in which, similar to what Spring was saying, how we're all coping with lockdown. And it was different for everybody. Everybody was coping in different ways. So what I was doing here is exploring those ways through the idea of kind of an activity book or a sticker book type thing that I used to love when I was growing up. And so a lot of these objects here are different ways in which I was coping. Some were healthy and some less. And you know, so from the yoga on the top to all the sweets and everything in between. And what I wanted to do is juxtapose this sort of really dark place of isolation with the lighter feeling of these sort of fun activity books that I remembered growing up. And so in these ones, I know the ones I used to do were like, there would be a scene of cowboys, or, you know, you could imagine being a scuba diver, and you could imagine any sort of reality and just like be inside of it. But there was no reality that I could ever have imagined going through what we've all been through the last year and a half. And just changing a little bit my approach to talk about what this is practically. So all these little objects onto the paper are attached with magnets, and visitors to the gallery are invited to interact with them. And what's been really fun for me is walking through the gallery and seeing all the new arrangements that people have come up with. And I think that too is a bit of a reaction from the isolation of the past year, because I haven't ever, other than this, made interactive art. But I think after all of the isolation, I was like, I want even my art to be able to interact with people. Like, we just have to get out and, you know, touch and have community and everything, because that's clearly, you know, necessary for human survival.
Thank you, Katherine.
John wrote, "This sculpture is made of curly willow branches. One reason I love to work with branches is that I can study them closely and thereby gain a greater appreciation of nature. In this piece, all of the twigs grow into 2 or 3 smaller ones. I find these passages where the branches divide to be very beautiful and suggestive of new growth and hope for the future. I'm fascinated that this branching form occurs many other places in nature, such as in our body's circulatory system, in rivers and streams, and in lightning, for example. The shadows created by the sculpture are also compelling to me. They are, of course, a reflection of the sculpture, and yet they are quite dissimilar. They are a very different color, and they are much more two-dimensional than the sculpture itself. I find the contrast between the artwork and the shadows to be very striking, and the shadows themselves to be very mysterious. With the flick of a light switch, they are gone. I'm also very interested in the movement of the sculpture. The movement allows the appearance of the sculpture to keep changing, and of course causes the shadow to keep moving as well. The motion is also variable depending on ambient air currents. The sculpture pauses, speeds up, and slows down, and even reverses direction. In working with the sculpture itself, the shadows, and the movement, I hope to engage the viewer on several levels. Thank you.
Everyone, my name is Traci Talasco, and I'm a sculptor and an installation artist. And my work uses architecture as a social, political space to deal with things like female identity and power imbalances. And the work that I created in the gallery, 99.44% Pure and Other White Lies, uses bars of ivory soap to create these cinder blocks. Okay, the work is inspired by the events of the past year. And I was really thinking a lot about social injustices and really, I would say, fueled by my anger over the murder of George Floyd and countless others and the harmful nature of white privilege. So this led me to an investigation about my own identity as a white female. And language and titles are really important in my work. And so I started investigating the color white specifically. And I was interested in how it has historically become synonymous with things that are good and pure. For example, we have phrases such as lily white or white as snow or even white lies, which are, the good kinds of lies. So the title uses Ivory Soap's advertising slogan, 99.44% pure. And the cinder blocks represent how these harmful ideas have become systemic structures, and they're really ingrained within our society. And at the same time, the soap is temporary. So you can see in this detail how some of the bars are weathered or being washed away. And I'm using it as a metaphor to symbolize how these hateful and dangerous ideologies will erode and wash away over time, and creating a hopeful message about a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable society. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mike Sorgatz. My paintings here are titled Voices. They're gouache on paper. When I approached this project, I kept coming back to the idea of voices. We've been on this call together for over a year, hearing each other's voices and sharing our stories and spending time together. Early last year, we were all living in such reduced circumstances. Probably the only people we talked to were in our homes or maybe people that we worked with. I took that as an opportunity to get this wonderful group of artists together, and it opened up the world again. So the idea of voices seemed like a natural fit. Before the pandemic, I had a show of work that featured figures with abstracted versions of speech bubbles. I revisited that idea for these paintings, but now I'm using the bubbles within a framework as a structure to support and connect the figures, just like this call has provided a structure for us over this past year. Thank you.
Brian's work is somewhat autobiographical, dealing with issues of loss, death, and memories. He takes objects that have been broken or cast off and builds cases around them, similar to medieval reliquaries. For the past year and a half, I think he thinks, and I agree, many of us have felt cast off or somewhat adrift, separated from friends and family. These TI Artist Zoom meetings were a lifeline for Brian and for so many of us, offering reassurances that we were still working and sharing useful news and helpful information. In one session, Sima had a large wall of portrait drawings and a grid arrangement behind her, and we joked that it looked like a drawing of a Zoom session. She admitted, yes, that's kind of what it was. This had a big effect on Brian, who began to think in her terms how he could use Zoom as an inspiration. After a couple of years without a studio, Brian had just built out a new one when everything shut down. But slowly, as it became safer to travel, he began to make short, wary trips to get things set up, and after a number of months, he was set up. Then, thinking of all of those friends talking, laughing, and sharing on his tiny computer screen, he built a new case and began getting elaborate on the inside. He thinks of this as a tribute to those Zoom meetings with the little characters in a little window. It's a bit more Baroque than his usual work, and certainly more Baroque than his simple MacBook where he viewed the meetings, but he felt it was worth an upgrade. This was the first sculpture he was able to make in almost 5 years, so it's a real tribute to those who helped inspire it, and reminds him that we weren't really discarded after all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I created a diptych with 2 interrelated pieces titled Make Haste Slowly and Voice of the People. My pieces are based loosely on themes of connections and community and utilize the same small colorful form configurations on each panel. My process began with drawing intuitively and playfully using pencil on paper. This approach is aligned with the automatic drawing process of the emblematic surrealists such as Miro. The impulse to be playful was a reaction to all the sadness and trauma of the past year. The title Make Haste Slowly is from a favorite Latin phrase of mine, Festina Lenti. This phrase refers to being thoughtful and careful in a diligent manner rather than rushing haphazardly through anything. Renaissance printer and Italian humanist Aldus Manutius, who was the founder of Aldine Press, adopted Make Haste Slowly as the slogan for his printing press. His press was the first to make affordable, small, pocket-sized books because he wanted to make great works accessible to everyday people, and that aligned with his humanist beliefs. So this is a nod to Aldus Manutius. I'm a fan. This nod to humanism seemed appropriate to me after the poignant and tragic situation humanity has been through this year. I have more to say about the work, but we're keeping it to 2 minutes. So I'll end now by saying I love working non-representationally because different interpretations are highly possible. I love that. I had a lot of fun working on these, and I hope viewers feel that joy too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elise Putnam, and you're looking at the piece Are We? We Are Monsters. My piece confronts the monstrosity of whiteness in America. I explore the complexity of grappling with a gendered and racialized identity. Are we? We are monsters. Contends with the discomfort of realizing that our intention is often not the same as our impact, and questions the extent to which being in a white body reinforces others' trauma. The title nods to James Baldwin's writings and speeches that declared, "People who shut their eyes to reality simply invite their own destruction, and anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence long after that innocence is dead turns himself into a monster."
Hello, I'm Vincent Tsao. The title of my drawing is 1-6. The image of that crowd rushing up the steps over and over and over again during that lame-ass attempted coup d'etat roiled my gut. The drawing emerged whole from that roiling. Artist Elizabeth Meggs has written, "A raucous crowd of determined flag-waving runners find themselves falling into a chasm of blank nothingness," in Vincent Tsao's ink drawing, demonstrating a tale of sound and fury signifying nothing. Thank you, Elizabeth. On to the next.
Hi, I'm Linda Tharp, and I have recently returned to New York City after having spent most of the past 14 months on the coast of Maine in an old family house. While I was there, I created a body of work in watercolor and ink, Sumi ink, and my piece in the show entitled Undine is one of them. The house in Maine is on an island that has many nature preserves and trails. During the pandemic period of isolation, I spent a lot of time walking the trails and also reading the history of the place. The island has been inhabited for millennia, originally by the Abenaki and their ancestors, but beginning with European colonization in 1607, there have been successive rounds of deforestation, reforestation, brutal conflict, abandonment, and resettlement. So when you're walking in the woods, you find stone walls and foundations and graves in the middle of nowhere. This gives the woods something of a haunted feeling. It's also geologically unique, with huge granite ledges covered with moss and roots in the middle of the forest. The shapes and spaces in the woods can seem animated by the elemental forces that create them. The title of my piece, Undine, comes from the writings of the Swiss alchemist Paracelsus. Undine is an elemental water spirit, which to me connects with my sense of animation in the natural world and the animated spirit of the painting. Thank you very much for coming.
Marcia writes, I'm a Brooklyn studio potter. My wheel-thrown and hand-built porcelain and stoneware pots are intended for everyday use to grace our tables and our lives with colors that attract the eye and forms that feel good to the hand. The attraction to making pots? The infinite variables of color, form, and function. Working on the wheel becomes a dance between me and that cold, inanimate material that comes so alive during the forming process. Influences are the porcelains of the Song Dynasty, the fluidity of Art Nouveau, and the principles of the arts and crafts movement. Some pieces are carved with botanical designs. On others, my border pots, the carvings are inspired by the subway tiles and the fantastical friezes of old New York architecture. After a necessarily ephemeral life in dance, finding clay and making pots that live on after the moment of creation is greatly satisfying. Thanks.
Hello. One of the things for me that COVID really did was, in a strange way, bring me closer together. So 6 years ago, I moved up to the Hudson Valley after many years in Brooklyn, and in a way was able to, just reconnect and see, more people than I had actually been seeing before then. So I wasn't actually seeing people who live next door to me, but then I was able to see this group of people. And I have 2 young children, so a lot of the pandemic was spent just figuring out what to do with them all the time. And I create these works on paper that are primarily from plants that I've either grown myself or collected. And one of the things is that I was able to involve the children in the collecting of them and the growing of them. So last spring and summer, just really being able to focus on that in a way that we hadn't before. We only have a 1/4 of an acre, but in our little 1/4 acre, that's still infinitely more than I'd ever had in Brooklyn. I never even had a fire escape stoop with some dirt outside. That was about it. With these pieces, I found a way to kind of give each plant equal importance. So it didn't matter if it was just, a weed that I had picked up somewhere, or we'd go for walks and forage things, or if it was a cultivated species and maybe something that was more precious. And just thinking about kind of the life cycle of plants. And so you have something like in this one, the hibiscus flowers, and the hibiscus themselves, they only last for 1 day. So the blossom will only be there for that 1 day. But through the pressing process and then through the process of making art with them, it's kind of a way for them to live on. So I'm creating these works that feel like they're sort of cheating death by being able to bring plants from all different seasons and all different life cycles together here. And in the show, it was actually a print of the original piece, just because it was kind of too big to transport down on the train and all that. Yeah, you can see more on my website.
Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, everybody.
Katerina Lanfranco is an artist who works in a variety of mediums, but primarily in painting. During the pandemic, she worked on a series of nature-inspired gestural abstractions called Nature Poems. This series was darker and more atmospheric than her previous work, fitting for the early dark days of fear and uncertainty during the pandemic. Her subsequent body of work that emerged became lighter and brighter, and is a series of paintings called Mystical Landscapes. Looking for deeper meaning in life through the making of art, Katerina starts with an idea or composition in mind, but lets intuition and deep knowing take over as she searches for the painting to reveal itself. For instance, the artwork on view in 2020-21 is called 3 Suns and a Moon, and only revealed itself in retrospect as a visual metaphor for her blended family of 3 sons and a daughter. The fact that family structure and order come into the work is a testament to how intense interpersonal dynamics became during the pandemic, when because of quarantines and COVID restrictions, as well as remote learning and work, people were forced to spend much more time at home with their families than usual. She is very thankful for the social and professional lifeline that the Wednesday night Zoom art group provided her during this time.
Hi, I'm Katherine Keltner, and thanks so much for joining us this evening. Like so many others, my space during the pandemic was different than my studio. Pre-shutdown, I grabbed some materials that I could bring with me: inks, pens, and paper. Though the means are limited, the works really do play on my central interest, which is a dialogue between natural and found orders. So I start with a material process, and that involves some sort of chance, and then try to find an order from that. Yes, this was sort of my working space during the pandemic, which sometimes involves small people. And then if you go to the next slide, Tracy, on the right, you can see the ink pools largely as it will. I don't have a lot of control over that. And on the left, you can see I begin to trace those ink forms and create masses or areas to form a sort of map-like composition. The first drawing from this series of work is called Into the Light. And the title is really indicative of how I felt or was trying to feel. The uncertainty of the quarantine, what it would entail, for how long. It was a little bit like being in a dark tunnel. And that idea of a light somewhere, the searching for it or finding it in whatever way possible, that's what I needed and wanted to share with others. Each title is a reference to some expression of the time. So initially, titles were like Swimming Upstream, Just Us, What a Mess. And then slightly later into things, Returning, Getting Back Up. And then the last shot, I think I have one more slide, yes, is a group of these drawings which were installed late last year and photographed by our very own ward, Yoshimoto. Thank you.
Hi, it's Janice again. This is JoJo and Friends, one of the paintings in the series JoJo Stays Home that I painted during the pandemic lockdown. And I actually painted it for this show. And I'm not sure who the squashes are, but we'll just leave it at that. It's difficult to remember how scary it was at the beginning of the pandemic. The numbers of COVID cases and deaths were rising daily, and we didn't really have a handle on how to act in the world and be safe. I did spend most of my time indoors, but early on I ran over to the studio and with the help of my husband, grabbed as many art supplies as I could. And we set up a makeshift studio in my front foyer, which was awkward, in and out, impossible. Food was also a matter of concern. The grocery stores were scary. There were long lines once you got there, and empty shelves oftentimes when you got inside. Deliveries were hard to come by. At some point, I signed up for a weekly delivery of produce from Misfits Markets. No plug intended. I went a little crazy. I ordered the Monster Box. It was actually kind of comical. There were big bowls of squashes and apples and onions on every surface of our apartment. So I did what any painter would do. I started painting them. But I wasn't really inspired until I found a little blue owl tucked away. The owl would become JoJo. And the relationship between this playful little creature and the sustenance and safety that the vegetables represented became an important part of the painting. JoJo's lightness counters the gravity of the lockdown. Thank you.
Spencer, this was a piece that was conceived, this is her statement, this was conceived in gratitude to healthcare workers and in memory of those who died of COVID. It is made from cut up surgical masks embroidered onto cotton fabric. A couple of years ago, Spencer was in a CVS and paused at an end cap covered in miniature plug-in disposable air freshener, each in those impossible to open clamshell packaging. They were like Russian dolls of petroleum products, promising to smell like a forest if you connected it to the power grid. This must be what peak plastic looks like, she thought. New York City had just passed a plastic bag ban. Sea turtles were having a moment. And McDonald's even switched to paper straws, which was bizarre. Fortunately, it was not peak plastic. We're not anywhere near that. In the first few months of COVID, when everyone dressed like they were about to perform an appendectomy, PPE bloomed like dandelions out of every sidewalk, crevice, and gutter. This was the time when people gloved up, only to peel them off and drop them on the pavement before loading up their cars with groceries, no doubt on their way home to wash each potato with hot water and Dawn. I eyed my mail with suspicion, allowing it to mellow for a few days before I opened it, after which I washed my hands for 2 full renditions of Happy Birthday. There was no PPE, at least not the right PPE, and then it was everywhere. Now it's on its way to the sea turtles. I'm not even mad, though I wish more of it had ended up in the trash and less in the storm drains. In the archaeological dig of the future, this will be the COVID stratum. It will be blue. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sima, and I wanted to write something to say why and how I made this sculpture. But the truth is, this artwork seemed to have a mind of its own. It seemed to be nudging me through challenges and humorous possibilities. It was a delicious experience to be able to follow where the art was leading me. It started with the lineup of Amazon food delivery boxes in the entry hall of my apartment, taking their time for decontamination. I loved looking at those boxes. And it started with me doing experiments, testing plaster bandages to cover my face and my hand, and playing around with air dry paper clay. And this sculpture now in the gallery started when I could begin to be back at work in my studio last month. And when I sat in this workspace so much larger than the surface of my kitchen table, I thought of Mary Oliver's question, the poet Mary Oliver. What do you want to do with your one wild and precious life in my wild and precious space? This artwork is the beginning of my response to that question. Making this artwork, I began to accept the reality that I am now no longer looking like the life mask on side 2. I am an aging hippie. My face is now not that of a young woman. The details on the surface of the paper clay led me to experience a compassion for myself as I am stepping forward into my unfolding post-COVID life. When I heard the Joan Armatrading song, Always in My Dreams, I was moved to tears. Her lyrics said exactly what I felt. It is my wish for myself as I step forward now. It is my wish for all of us. Let's live the life we dared to dream. Thank you.
This is the work of Ward Yoshimoto. In response to 2020 and all the crazy things that made it such a memorable year, he created a series of work that is both timely and poignant. Here are some of his pieces and thoughts on the things that made the news. Vent. 1. An opening that allows air, gas, or liquid to pass out of or into a confined space. 2. The expression or release of a strong emotion, energy, etc. What more can I say? Everything having to do with the COVID-19 pandemic is expressed in this one word. Bait. 1. A food used to entice fish or other animals as prey. 2. To deliberately annoy or taunt someone. With all of the politics of last year, from the Black Lives Matter movement, the Epstein trial, and the election in November, he wanted to highlight the stories and year we all had in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, artists. I mentioned the book briefly at the beginning. Its title is the same name as our show. It's 2020-21 and features many of the works that are in the show and is on view in the gallery. There is also a link in the chat to preview it if you're interested. I'm sort of buying some time for Elizabeth to sort of cull together the questions. And when she lets us know we're ready, we'll get started with the Q&A.
Oh, we're ready. Hey, everyone. Hey. Thank you all for being here tonight. So we'll do some questions and we can do them where you either just raise your hand and ask a question verbally, or if you prefer to enter one in the chat, that's fine too. I'll just get it started. A question for all of the artists. I want to know, how did the pandemic affect your art practices? So just a lot of different things come to mind. If you depended on riding the subway, did that prohibit your going to your studio? If you couldn't make it to your studio, were you able to do work at home? So how did that go for all of you?
I can start. I lost my job, and so I was able to do more work once I got to the studio. And you know, I did have my little studio at home, so it's been a really just positive thing in comparison to all the ugly things.
Okay, anyone else? I know Janice definitely set up her studio in the foyer, which was a little awkward. I know personally, I stopped going to the studio at first when the pandemic hit. I was just too scared to even open my door. I know Sima felt the same way. So Sima, what happened? You had this big studio and then suddenly you're in your apartment. How did that go?
Hiding under a rock, hiding under the duvet. Really terrified to even, I mean, there were so many people sick in my building that maintenance said, okay, you high risk people, don't even go out to the trash chute. We'll just put your garbage outside the door, we'll take it away. So I didn't leave. I really was not making art except, you know, this colored pencil on a corner of the table on paper, not on the table. But this group was amazing. And it helped me to have this connection. It helped me to get over the fear of leaving my apartment, the fear that I might never be able to find my muses again. They might be gone forever. And so I'm just really grateful that this community is what it is.
I agree. I know the first few months for me, it was like my jaw was dropped and I was staring at the television and listening to the reports. I was hearing, for 2 weeks in April, I was hearing continuous sirens, 24/7 ambulance sirens, and I knew it wasn't crime. And it's almost impossible to think of like, let me go back to working on my fun, playful paintings. So I know all of the artists felt that way. Any other artists want to chime in about this, like how your studio practice was affected?
Yeah, I'll throw in a point here. I'm a big fan of nervous energy. So I was working at home and now I have a ginormous stack of works on paper. I've got to figure out where to show those. For me, it was a fantastic escape from all of that, everything you just described.
And to all of you, would you say seeing other people in our group doing their artwork, did that motivate you to start doing your artwork again? So if you'd been totally isolated, would you have been as likely to go ahead with your work? No, me too. I think it definitely helped to see, okay, other artists are getting back into their work. So I'm gonna ask Elise, did the group help you get back into your work? I know Elise had a great statement. She said that in the early days of the pandemic, it felt like we were walking through Jell-O. I love that statement, Elise.
Yeah, that's from I have a piece of writing in the book along with a self-portrait. A lot of my other work is like figurative drawings. I found, I mean, the group was great. Thank you all. I found it very difficult to make work at a time when, you know, a lot of my work has to do with, you know, what does it mean to be in a white body? What does that, how does our existence reinforce trauma? And having George Floyd murdered and the response that was nationwide and worldwide gave me pause to step back and just give more space for more artists of color who were making work about this and just like take time to listen. So it was not a productive space to be working in, but it was a productive time to like learn, I would say.
Thank you, Elise. Traci, I want to ask you, how has this project helped you deal with the pandemic overall? Did this project of the book and the exhibit, did it help you return to regular studio practice? Was your regular studio practice disrupted in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, for me as an installation artist and a sculptor, and not being able to come into the studio was really hard because I just don't have space at home. So I really had to rethink the way that I work and what was possible. And I would say for a good few months, I just felt numb from all of it and really unable to do much of anything. But then I really, like I said, I felt, I think all of the experiences that we go through end up in our work somehow, because our work is such a reflection of who we are personally. So, I mean, the group was great to help motivate, and eventually I started coming back into the studio and making my work again. But I think it really took time and distance, like Elise was saying, to sort of process what was happening and then interpret it into my work. I felt like I just really needed time to process. I feel like I'm even still processing the craziness that we have been through in this past year. So it's been really interesting on a personal level to see how that's appearing in my work in different ways. It's been an interesting process for sure.
I agree. What I want to know, and this is open to all of the artists, how do you anticipate the last 15 months might change the trajectory of your work? Can you anticipate that yet? I know I can't yet, but I do feel that the past 15 months will cause a big change in my work. What do you all think? Anyone? Linda, Vincent, do you think just the pandemic itself is going to change what you're doing with your work, or do you feel committed to what you were doing before? Does anyone feel like the pandemic is going to dramatically change what you've been doing?
It's very hard to gauge. You know, I kind of feel like, for one thing, it ain't over. So it's hard to say what the complete other side of it is going to be. I do want to mention how inspired I was by, in the midst of the worst part of it, Mike made these beautiful little gouache paintings, and then he created a book from that, which we all bought. And like, I was up in Maine, and getting that in the mail and being able to hold it in my hands and see the paintings of my friend in New York was really inspiring, and kind of made me feel like life was going on in some way, that something positive was happening.
I definitely agree. We need to give Mike a big round of applause. His spirit of tenacity inspired all of us. So Mike, as soon as the pandemic started, he created these small watercolor paintings, and then released a beautiful book of them. And I think that got us started talking about doing a book ourselves. But I want to jump back, Mike, back to March of 2020, when things were just beginning with the COVID-19 pandemic. What made you decide to set up the Zoom talk in the first place? You sent us an email. What inspired that?
I've got a helicopter flying overhead, so give me a second here. Yeah, well, like a lot of people, I mean, I really had no idea what was going to, happen with all this. And at the beginning, I thought, well, maybe it's a couple of weeks or a month and we're shut down, and then things come back to normal. And after a couple of weeks, it became pretty clear that wasn't going to happen. And so I started going for plan B. And I just knew, if we were going to be locked in, there was going to be issues of isolation. And, I just sort of wanted to reach out to my tribe here and get in touch and see what we could put together. And honestly, I didn't really have any great master plan other than, having a bunch of friends get together. And it's really just sort of grew in such a beautiful way. I never would have imagined the show happening back in March, or the book, or anything that has happened actually. It's been an amazing experience, and kind of the middle of a horrible time, but the support was amazing.
Well, we all have tremendous gratitude to you for really pulling us together. You deserve a big round of applause for that.
Thanks.
Also, Janice deserves a lot of credit. Janice organized the exhibit. Janice, I would like to ask you, what motivated you to take on this challenging and large project? I remember one day you sent us an email like, "Hey guys, I think we could have an exhibit here, and I'm thinking of applying to have an exhibit in the gallery space." So could you talk about what motivated you, what sparked that? Because you have taken on a lot of work, and we appreciate everything you've done.
Well, thank you, but so many people have helped out, especially in this last 2 weeks. It's been amazing, everyone pitching in. It's like, we're putting on a show. It's very exciting. I think, I just, as along with the book, I just wanted to sort of document that period of time that we were spending together. And I had this hope that when the show was up, we could actually come together and see each other in person. And as we've been installing, I know we're all being safe and masks, but we get to see each other, and it's been so exciting. And just we make jokes about like the 3D version of people, because this is how we've been looking at each other for the last year and a half. But yeah, it was really just it was an amazing, it was just an amazing positive thing that we kind of did together, and just to show that, or put a benchmark on that or something. That's all.
Well, you've been amazing. We have so much gratitude for you for everything you've done, and pulling the group together and organizing the exhibit. I'm going to jump into some specific questions that people have had for specific artists about their work. This is for Katherine Forst. A lot of us really know Katherine Forst as this incredible mosaic artist. And I know that she studied in Italy, learning traditional mosaic practices. If you haven't had a chance to see Katherine's mosaics, definitely look up Katherine Forst. Her mosaics are incredible. Her piece in the show, the book, it was the piece with magnets. You probably remember, an activity book for the pandemic. Someone in the chat asked if this is a departure from the work we're familiar with, and wanting to know if we'll see more of that in the future. And then another question is, how did working in this interactive format make you rethink your practice? So we can go with the first question. I don't mean to overwhelm you. Is this a departure from your work that we're all familiar with? Do you anticipate we'll see more of that in the future?
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a departure for sure. And I think this, it almost was like an art therapy situation for me. Like I had to get it out, and this was a form I chose, but it's very unusual because, yeah, usually I'm like you said, thank you, Elizabeth, trained in mosaic art. So I generally do work with small pieces of stone, or my little departure from that would be like fresco, which was the last series I did. But yeah, I have no idea if I'll keep doing this. I do think that I've had a few kind of things that I've been working through my life, and after this piece have been going towards, oh, maybe I can work them through in some weird drawing situation, that's been really for me, and not for like, oh, to show, but yeah, it could very well be that I do that more in the future. And I hadn't really thought about it in terms of my past work as to the second question, but it is interesting to think, mosaic is usually such like the whole point of it is to be very permanent and stiff and kind of last forever, but maybe there could be some interesting way to do mosaic in a more interactive way. Yeah, that's something to think about for sure.
Okay, I can't wait to see what's ahead, Katherine. And by the way, when you look at Katherine's work, definitely take a look at the titles. She's sort of the master of creating funny, hilarious, witty titles. Someone had a question for Julia, and I think Julia Whitney Barnes had to leave the chat. Someone asked what her painting medium was. Julia she had to leave, but she's been doing pretty consistently recently, working in every medium, but she's been doing a lot of cyanotypes where she takes pressed flowers, creates a blue and white cyanotype, and then once that's created, she will use watercolor, gouache, some ink, to draw on that to create the process. So it's not just a straight painting. She's working with cyanotypes. There's a technical question for Traci. How in the world do you adhere ivory soap bars together? I can't imagine. How do you make them form cinder blocks? Have you ever had one of these sculptures long enough to see what happens over time? Does it begin to disintegrate? What happens?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, I put them together with tile adhesive and grout, like pretending they're regular tiles. And yeah, I've done a lot of tests in my studio with soaking the soap in water and wearing them away in different ways. But this piece is actually, it's going to be in a much larger scale as part of an exhibition that I'm doing next year, a solo show at the Morris Jamel Mansion, and it will be outside as a partial house foundation. So this was sort of a smaller version of the idea that's sort of growing into a larger project. But they are actually all just glued together. I've thought about, putting rebarb or something else inside of them, but I really want them to sort of crumble and erode away. And what's interesting, I sort of wore away some pieces inside, since I really envision this piece outdoors so that it can weather over time and wear away. And you'll notice in the gallery, you can see some of the bars of soap, they start to crack open, they kind of yellow, they get all puffy and dried up, and they do all kinds of weird and interesting things. So I'm really excited to see how it's going to sort of deconstruct over time when it's actually outdoors.
Yikes, I can't wait to see. You should document it for us so we can see. So I have a question for Spring. Spring does these incredible still life paintings, but the content is has a very, very meaningful sort of metaphoric content. So you saw her two pieces of the honey bears tonight. One was full of honey and one was empty. And I think that's a powerful statement. Spring, I would love to know more about your painting process. How do you do those paintings? Is it oil paint or acrylic? Do you work with photo references or have the objects on site? Just a little more about your painting process. We'd love to know.
Sure. So I start out with finding the objects that I find appealing or have character, and then I have a photo shoot with them, and sort of move things around, change the backgrounds, and then from there, there's usually a conversation that comes out of that. My concepts usually start with the objects I find, and then while I'm playing with them, I realize, oh, this ties into this bit of my life so clearly to me. So yeah, then forms the metaphors for things that we go through. And then anyway, so I print the photos out and then I paint from the photo reference, and I use acrylics. And I kind of use it like watercolor sometimes. The base of it is, the first base of paint is thick, but then over the top of it, I do a lot of like watered down layers to build it up for that realism.
Okay, thank you, Spring, and I encourage everyone to take a look at more of Spring's work if possible. My next question, and also I'm still welcoming questions from all of you if you want to put them in the chat. Do we have any questions where anyone's raising a hand yet? Okay, my next question is for Sima. So to preface this, I have to tell everyone, when you look at our artist book, Sima's double-page spread has a QR code. And it has an image of her beautiful sculpture it's sculptural of a face. And it has photographs of Sima as a child with her grandmother. But when you scan the QR code with your phone, you hear a recording of Sima's grandmother's voice. And when I heard that, I have to admit, tears came to my eyes. I was so deeply moved by that. So I wanted to ask Sima if you could tell us more about how you have the recording of your grandmother's voice that we can hear through this scannable QR code in the book. Tell us a little bit about your grandmother, when she was alive, how the recording came about.
Thank you for that question, Elizabeth, and your comment. And because of your comment, I included images of my grandmother and me and the QR code on side 3 of the sculpture in the gallery. My grandmother was magical. My grandmother taught me about the blue fairy and how if I did my part, help would come from who knows where. And that's been my guiding philosophy in my life. My grandmother moved when I was like, I think 10 years old. She moved to Florida. And so she was no longer part of my weekly life. And so she and my family exchanged these little blue records in the mail. You might have to be a certain age to know about this. And it was called a dictaphone machine. And we made recordings, we asked each other questions. And after my grandmother died, I found the machine and this huge pile of records, these blue discs in her front closet. And so I took them to use in an artwork and went through all of the recordings and picked out what I wanted to hear her say to me to guide me. And so, but because of COVID, it couldn't be interactive. So instead of listening through headphones, through brainstorming with people, it turned out that a QR code could connect to the audio. And so you can hear it by pointing your phone at it in the book and in the gallery.
And I see Elise just put a link in the chat where everyone can go there. But Sima, what years was your grandmother alive? Do you remember exactly, roughly?
Well, to give it some perspective, I think her father, or maybe it was her grandfather, was blacksmith to the last Tsar of Russia. So history person, when was that? My mother was born in 1917. So I don't know, what, 30 years before that? And she died when she was like in her 80s.
It's just amazing you still have that recording. I think it's such a treasure. It really is.
I still have that machine and those records. So yes, it's a treasure.
It really, and thank you for sharing it with us. Now, Katherine, we haven't turned to you yet. I know Katherine, she's very humble and sometimes she'll be quiet, but I know her to have a deep intellect. And I'm curious to know what Katherine has, if you've been reading anything good or watching any good movies through the pandemic. Do you recommend anything to us? Not to put you on the spot, if you need a minute, we can.
I have watched terrible, terrible things during the pandemic. Let's see. I watched Ozark, which I liked. Also very dark. And, you know, I think at first I was just reading, probably like a lot of us were, March, April, just reading a constant stream of news that was, you know, maybe not so healthy, not so helpful. And I did escape into some fiction or some short stories. I'm terrible about remembering authors' names though. I'm gonna look on my phone and see if I have a note of anything.
Okay, we can swing back around,
Okay,
or
let me
I can
look
put
it
some
up.
suggestions in the chat. So overall, I want to ask all of the artists who are still in the chat right now, do you feel like this project has brought you closer to your studio mates as friends? We always have been friends, but I feel like now we've been through this together. What do you guys think? Are we closer friends?
I'm ready to start the next project.
I have to say that this group did inspire me to get painting again after 3+ years of not being into it so much. But that was mostly because there was like, oh, there's a goal and a deadline now. But I really came to the group Wednesday, or the group talks, because the stories shared. I really learned so much about everybody in this group that I would have never imagined. Like, I can't think of any examples, but like, each of us, something that would happen when we were a kid, or oh yeah, I was best friends with Hoobie Daba, and we wouldn't have ever known this otherwise. But that's that's why I came to it. It's just like learning more about everybody here was the best part for me.
I agree, definitely. Linda and Vincent, we learned the story of how the two of you met. Would you like to share that with us? We were like, they were always married, but we never knew how that started.
Ballroom night at the 92nd Street Y. He did a nice foxtrot.
It's not the place you think of as a dancer, that you're not going there to meet someone, you're going there to practice your dance steps, and it turned out we were going to the same dance school. I was going on Monday nights and she was going on Tuesday nights, and we had a mutual friend who went on both Monday and Tuesday, and as we walked into the place, she introduced the two of us, and I remember thinking, I'm going to ask her to dance.
It's very romantic, very sweet. It gives me hope. One thing, Marcia Clark Lind is not here. She does these incredible ceramic pieces. And I encourage you to look in the book. She has one piece in the show, but in the book, there's this beautiful spread of her work. We learned that Marcia had been an Alvin Ailey dancer, and I think that relates so beautifully to the pottery wheel and the three-dimensionality of creating ceramics and pots. So that was something I was thrilled to learn. Elise, I'm going to put you on the spot. One night after we'd been talking for almost a year, Elise mentioned to us, she was like, by the way, my dad is a magician. And we were all like, what? What? So Elise, would you just want to mention a little bit about that?
About my father's career? Sure. Yeah, I mean, my dad owned a manufacturing company, and so I grew up illustrating magic tricks and making rubber vomit. That's pretty much
that's just fantastic to me. I'm and I don't know if we would have ever learned that. It's just a compelling, wonderful backstory. So I'm going to turn to the audience now. I see lots of sweet faces. I see some members of our studio community. Oh, there's Marcia. Hey, Marcia, I didn't realize you were here. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask right now? Don't be shy. Ask us anything.
Hey, Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you, what's the inspiration for the shapes you use on your paintings? They're so whimsical and fun.
I love just working in an intuitive, playful way. I really love the Bauhaus. So I love Paul Klee is one of my favorites. I love Kandinsky. I think non-representational work, we've only really accepted it in the art world for a little over 100 years. So I think that it's actually something kind of new, and I think there's a lot to explore with that. Another thing I think about, like in reading about graphic design history, Paul Rand, who was a famous logo designer, he talked about how with logo design, to remain stylistically timeless, he felt that you should use elemental forms, sort of universal elemental forms, so that you're sort of staying away from the decorative, stylistic aspects of the era. And I think about that with painting, like how can I make a painting that isn't stuck in the stylistic trends of an era. So that's one reason I work with elemental form. So it's kind of like music, you know, and I think that analogy has been common with non-representational work, that you know, shapes and colors and composition. In music, you have things, if it's non-verbal music like classical or jazz, you have that non-representational aspect of sounds and tones and composition that's really relates to working in a similar way. So it's a lot of fun too. So yay. Anyone else have any questions? I see Dean from our studio. I see Eleanor. I see my cousin Lisa and Walker. I see my mom. Does anyone have any questions or want to just share anything? Traci, let's hear from you.
You know, I just want to say it's interesting because, you know, Janice, you had mentioned this at the beginning, how, you know, it was only when we started putting the show together where we, you know, got to see these connections between the different works of art. Because we all work in very different media and very different styles. And I think it's really fascinating to see the way all of us have interpreted the emotions and the events of this past year. Like, if you think about it, there's so much emotion in all of the work in very different ways. For some of us, we express this idea of trauma or social justice or things that we wanted to change. And then for some of you, it seemed like, you know, using art as an escape and finding joy and finding these small moments. And it's interesting that there are these sort of two, almost these two different coping mechanisms that we used as artists, because we all sort of process our feelings and emotions and experiences in some ways through our work. So I just thought that was interesting to note the way that we all, in different ways, translated the experience and the emotions of the past year.
Yeah. Thank you, Traci. Now we just got a question coming in from Eleanor Traubman, and I want to mention during the pandemic, Eleanor, I have to acknowledge she's a friend of mine, but she's also married to Mike Sorgatz. Eleanor launched something wonderful called My Local Heroes online, where she wrote profiles of different local heroes in Brooklyn. So it might be your local sanitation worker who's really doing something to help his neighbors, or it might be a school teacher who's going out of her way to make sure her students have their regular meals. So Eleanor is someone I think we should have a special night to interview Eleanor. She asked the group, will this group keep going, and what do you think you might do next as a group? Do you guys think we'll keep going? Do you see anything in the future? What do we think we'll do next? I'm trying to get us to form a synchronized roller skating group, but I don't know if anyone else is in.
Well, I hope we keep going, but I think after this, everyone's going to be ready for a nice long nap.
Yes.
I vote for more in-person challenges and projects. I mean, it's amazing what we did get accomplished, and even today, with the emails whirling around, trying to get everything set up. I don't know, this is based off one of your earlier questions. One of the things that I really enjoy, you know, post our Zoom meetings is when I go to the studio, I see you guys, and it's so much different than before. There's a little more, you know, personal conversation and just checking in and just happy to see people. I think, you know, and some of us have known each other for a long time, and there was a lot of art talk in the way that you're not really saying anything. You're like, oh, what shows did you go see? Or telling you, oh, I had the show coming up, and sort of like credentials and, you know, who you know, and And not that anyone was icky about that, but it's just nice to have that sort of personal connection now.
Definitely, we've been starved for a personal connection this year.
I predict
Okay.
that we're gonna have more regular balcony meetups.
Yes.
Food and camaraderie.
Yes, yes.
It's so helpful to know what other artists are going through. I have plenty of friends who aren't artists, but with connecting with artists, they understand, you know, at the start of the pandemic, we're like, can you even make artwork at all? And we're just, you know, I remember being like, no, I'm just like staring at my television in my pajamas, panicked, you know? And it just helped, I think everyone related to what each other was going through the pandemic. Katherine has a book recommendation. She put it in the chat, but for those of you who aren't on the chat, it's called Transcendent Kingdom by, and I might mess this last name.
I wrote it wrong. Or maybe it was autocorrect. It's Yaa, Y-A-A, Gyasi.
Okay.
It finally came to me. Seems like a good thing to share.
A good summer read. Thank you for the recommendation. Does anyone have any questions or comments from all of us?
I have a thought about how we are at the studio before and after, which is that it's a very large studio. There are 97 studios there, and we tend to isolate ourselves by choice. A lot of times when I'm there in the daytime, I feel like I'm the only one there. And then someone comes out from behind a door and you realize there's someone else there. But we do tend to go into our rooms and isolate ourselves because that's what we're there to do. But then when we were faced with this enforced isolation, this reaching out towards each other has been incredibly sustaining. And I feel like I've gotten to know you all better than, you know, like passing in the hall and saying hi and, you know, learning that Elise's dad is a musician. It's like those kind of details are really meaningful.
Magician.
Magician?
You said musician.
Musician, magician.
That has to do with, actually, we went years ago to this museum in New Orleans, the Mardi Gras Museum. And the woman who was there had this very heavy New Orleans accent. And she kept talking about the magicians. And gradually we realized she was saying what she meant was the musicians. But anyway.
One thing that sticks in my mind, I think you all will agree, the day of the insurrection was a Wednesday. And we had our Wednesday night talk. And we all joined the Zoom that night. And we were all just like, what just, I mean, we're almost speechless that night. So that's one night I really remember. I just remember saying like how scared I felt that day. And so that was just this moment in American history that we shared and connected about. And then Vincent did his drawing in response to that. Does anyone else have anything, any comments, any questions for us?
I was really, it's made a huge difference to me having these Wednesday night meetings and connecting. I've tried to make as many as possible. Listening is such a freeing experience, hearing other people's experiences and letting it take you where they went, you know, on their journeys and being a part of their lives has been fantastic. And then the moments of hope. I whined a great deal during these sessions, but the moments of hope, like when we all started talking about after trying to get vaccinated so hard, and finally it started happening and became easier. And we saw everybody's shoulders coming down and everybody beginning to relax a little more. And that was, I think, the real telling point for me, a turning point, seeing everybody chill out a little.
And we definitely had some fun through the year. I have to say, like we had a Christmas party or holiday party, New Year's Eve party. And those things helped, you know. I mean, a lot of us have been alone in our apartments and it just made the year a lot more fun. So I appreciate that so much personally. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I don't have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, hey, it's
Okay.
Dean. Dean is an
Hi.
amazing artist too.
Oh,
So he
thank
has a,
you.
yeah.
I lost my last studio and moved into TI I think February 1st. And when I first got there, it was like crickets. You know, it's starting to emerge a little bit now, right? A little more. But I was really excited to actually move into a bona fide art studio. Before that, I'd been in other studio spaces that kind of had offices and other things going on, including artists. And I come from a comics community, and I also write plays. But it was really exciting to see the gallery, and then, you know, over the few months, see different solo shows. And then this group show was really inspiring to me. I too co-curated a comics anthology during the pandemic, about the pandemic. And so it's really exciting to see how y'all are responding with your works. Even if it's just one piece, I'm sure you have other, you know, responses as well in your artwork. But I just thought it was really cool, the show, and I'm grateful. And I'm more grateful that I'm getting to learn more about you folks who I occasionally see or, you know, walk past. And I try to be social, and I hope we can be more social as things get better, fingers crossed. And we got that beautiful patio. So.
We definitely will. And by the way, people were like, have you guys seen Dean's work? His work is great. So we're all really excited that you've joined this space. So.
That's really kind. Thank you so much. And again, I'm thrilled and excited. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have, oh, Sima.
Oh, hi. Somehow my hand got up. Oh no, never mind. Yes, I have two things to say. One is, wow, I could never have created this piece that's in the gallery now without the magic, the helping hands from so many people in this group. From Traci, who came by and said, oh, hey, are you gonna leave those white or are you gonna stain those faces? And it was like, well, you know, I don't know. There's nobody here in my house at my kitchen table asking me things like that. And so that was wonderful. Or Ward, oh my God, I was trying to put that together, that I was trying to hang the hands on the boxes using dental floss and duct tape, or maybe Scotch tape or something. And Ward came in and he said, no, and gave me some, that wire, armature wire. I hadn't seen armature wire since the 60s. I had not ever remembered about armature wire. So many things like that happened. And then the other thing I wanted to say was I wanted to invite everybody to please participate, because like Katherine, I feel a need, a commitment, a desire to involve the viewer in some kind of ceremony. And so please, when you go to the gallery, please participate. I invite you to think about that which you have come to value in your life during this pause, this time out, and think about what you are intending to hold close and hold dear as you step forward. And then write it down and on the green tag, and then tie knot, which is part of the ceremony, and then attach it to the tree growing in the Brooklyn Gallery.
Yeah, your piece is incredible, Sima, and in the book too, just deeply moving to me. So, and does anyone else have anything else? Another comment or question? We're getting close to 7:30. We have about 5 more minutes. Anyone else? Any thoughts, questions? You can ask us anything.
I just wanted to, for people who would like to know more about the artists who are presenting or TI or any of that, where can they find information about us? What's the best way for that to happen? Elizabeth.
Oh, Oh, you're asking me. I thought Janice or Mike might know.
Janice, Mike,
In
and
terms
I
of the
can't.
TI show, let's see. I should pull
Well,
something up to make sure.
there is a Facebook page for the group, so that's probably the most central place. Can
What
we
is the
share
Facebook?
that?
Which I
Share
can't
that
just prove in the
link?
chat, huh?
Okay. And then how to get a copy of the book too. Really with the book, you could email any of the individual artists, but also there is a blurb link if you want to order it directly, which maybe someone could put that in the chat too, the blurb link for the book. I think the book looks beautiful. I do want to acknowledge how much work Mike did. He designed the whole book, which was an incredible amount of work. Mike, would you want to talk about the design process? Because he really, I mean, it's incredible that he designed a whole book.
It was a process. And in the end, the book was designed. No, it was fun. It was a really fun project to put together. I used to make a living doing graphic design, so it was kind of fun to just exercise those old muscles. And I went a little crazy and came up with like 8 variations on the book cover, of which we only chose one. So maybe in the next run we'll use a different one. But it was a fun project. And again, I mean, I think I would say not just with the book, but there's 18 artists who are in the show, and everyone just contributed so much through every step of the way in whatever way they could. I mean, from taking photographs to helping transportation. I mean, this was really a huge group effort that wouldn't have been able to have been accomplished by 1 or 2 people. It was truly everyone lending a hand. So thank you all.
Yay. I have to say, Marcia helped me transport my artwork to the gallery. I also took a chair I needed to move, and I used this blanket that I thought it had been to the laundry, but it had cat fur like stuck in the blanket. And I got cat fur all over Marcia's car, and I feel terrible. So Marcia, thank you for tolerating that, the cat fur.
Not a problem. It was very easy, and it was a pleasure to spend time with a friend. So that was delightful.
And I think we did have some funny stories through the year. A couple of things we did that were funny. Are you all familiar with the process of Rick rolling? This is a process. No? Okay, so to explain it, Rick rolling is a joke where you pretend you're presenting an email, a link that's legitimate. Like you might say, hey, could you please check out these 18th century sculptures? But instead you give a joke link that is to a video by Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. And so that's a thing. It's like, if you look up Rick rolling, so we kept Rick rolling each other through the year. Another running joke was the Comfy was this giant oversized sweatshirt that you can buy. There are infomercials for it. So a number of us bought the Comfy during sort of the coldest days of winter, and we would show up to the talk wearing this giant sweatshirt. And that made us giggle a lot too. So I think those moments of levity, just lightness, helped us all. So we still have a good group here. I know some of you might have more questions. Does anyone have a question? Someone asked if Elise. Oh, go ahead. Is that Kevin?
Hi, yes, it is. Hi, Elise. So I don't know. I'll bumble through it because I don't know anybody but Elise, which I was invited to this. It was really refreshing, though, because as an educator and a long time ago curator, and I've actually worked with Elise. You should do your chocolate head again. Anyways, it's so refreshing to be able to see not only the emergence of people from private into public, and this in some degree is the public, but it's the best opportunity. That's what this country is about in many ways, is about being in public. Your works are showing in galleries that public people can come and see. They may be mystified or hate it or love it or wonder at it. All of that above is like the reason you do it in public. So, and this emergence that's happened since January 21st has, linked up with spring and good weather and health and the body's getting better. And, this is how I teach, right, Elise? I just sort of shoot for the breeze. But anyways, this is a great thing to listen to all of you and your stories, and this great sort of support system, because as a nonprofit curator, the best part was going to artist studios and people coming to see the work and mingling with each other and doing all of that. That's profound stuff. So to see it emerging even like right now is really great stuff, great news. So I'll shut up.
Well, no, thank you. Those are great insights. Definitely. It's nice to meet you, Kevin.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Kevin.
We've got the link in the chat. Thanks, Mahalia. I think I've murdered your name. The link in the chat for the TI Studios website.
Could someone put the link in the chat for how to buy the book on Blurb? I don't have that link at hand right now.
Elise did that.
Has done it, yes.
Well, we are getting close.
Shamelessly promoted that book. I just want everybody to have access to it, but don't feel obligated to get it.
Yeah. We're getting close to 7, or we're a little after 7:30, and I know we said that's when we wrap things up, but does anyone have anything else they want to share or any questions that they want to ask? I just want to say how grateful I am to have connected with all of you. It's just been a lifeline, so meaningful to be in touch with artists who are incredibly positive. I think the positive spirit, the tenacity, the resilience everyone has had has uplifted me tremendously and helped me a lot. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. I also see my cousin Lisa, my mom in the chat. They've been incredibly sweet and supportive too. So I think we've all just relied on the connections we've had to get through the past few years, or past 15 months. So I just wish everyone in the chat that you all continue to be well and that we all have brighter, much brighter days ahead. I think the fact that we pulled together an art exhibit and a book through all of this, that says that, hey, you know, in the days ahead, who knows what can happen? It might be just completely great. I'm looking at a lot of you, and I know no brighter days are ahead, and great work will be ahead with everyone. So anyone else? Final comments?
That's a great place to end it. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you all. Thank you everyone. This has been a fun night.
Well, I just wanted to add, if you want to see more of anybody's work, if you go to the the Sweet Lorraine Gallery Instagram page, and if you look on any of our promotions in there, all the artists' handles are attached to one of those promotions. So you can sort of, you know, dive a little deeper and check out their work and follow them and see where they progress if you're interested. That's it. I just, you know, thank you all for coming.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Bye.